Global Just Transition Dialogue 2024, I think is something that we all need to understand. The point is not just transition, just transition. So I'll begin rather unusually by not talking about environment, ecology, ethics, equity, economics, etc. Being a scientist, I have to start with science. So I'll start with science. I have been a teacher in my life, and I used to teach what is called as non-Newtonian fluid mechanics. Fluids like water, they behave in a particular way, but there are other complex fluids who behave differently. Okay, polymer solutions, polymer melts. Even when you have an accentuated cold, those substances, many biological substances, they behave differently. And they are called non-Newtonian because they don't show the Newtonian behavior. So I used to do an experiment in the class. I would bring a silicon putty and make a ball out of it. It could be rolled like a rubber ball and bounce it. And it used to bounce. Then what I would do is that I would start my lecture, leave it on the table, come back and find that it doesn't remain a ball at all. It just spreads. And then I used to ask a question, is it a solid or is it a liquid? If it is a solid, how did it flow? If it is the liquid, how did it bounce? So these materials used to be called viscoelastic materials. They had the property of viscous fluids as well as elastic solids. But what mattered was the time of the experiment. When I bounced it, I did it in a fraction of a second. It will behave like a solid. But when I gave it enough time, it will flow. Okay? So time matters. Number one. Number two, the second experiment I used to do is to make it into a rod. And then I would gently pull it. And I could go as far as I wanted. But then what I would do is make it into a rod and snap it, and it will break. You got the message. When you talk about transition, if you don't take into account the characteristic timescales in which the change can be managed, whether it is social, whether it is economical, whether it is behavioral, you snap, all right? And that is why this point about transition, how do you manage it, on what timescales you do it, and while doing that, what processes you follow, they are going to be very, very important. This energy transition and industrial decarbonization, of course, are central to our global climate action agenda. And as the climate crisis intensifies, and it is intensifying, have you heard of 53.2 degrees centigrade and the rest of it, and the incessant rains and all? We have witnessed it all. So countries are increasingly aligning their policies and strategies to phase down fossil fuels to meet the temperature goals that have been outlined in the Paris Agreement. And excepting a few, I can name one or two people whom you know, there's little skepticism about climate change anymore and the aggressive measures that are required. However, as I said, it is also recognized that transitioning from fossil fuels will have significant social and economic disruptions impacting the workers associated, and we are talking about skills and the skill gaps and the rest of it associated with fossil fuel industries and local communities. It will also have implications for government revenue and social sector investments, both. Therefore, building a low-carbon economy will require developing measures to minimize the disruptions in the economic and social order and to ensure a just and inclusive transition of workers, of local communities, and the impacted regions. Now, as I said, You take a rod and snap it. Okay, so you want to do the transition very fast. What are the consequences of that? We have to learn from history. They said that when you use the word fail, that's the first attempt in learning. That's okay. But your best guru is your last mistake, as long as you learn from it. So I think let's start learning from what has happened in the past when people tried to do it in a hurry. So countries have paid a heavy price, social and economic, for failing to implement important measures, demonstrating that the success of the green transition will depend not only on technological shifts, but also on equitable policies. Uh, Several countries have rushed the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy without adequately considering the social and economic implications of a just transition, resulting in significant negative consequences. And I'll go through some examples on what has happened. If you look at the rush transition, the coal industry closure in 1980s of UK. You know, the UK's coal industry faced rapid closures in the 1980s under the leadership of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. You remember that. As the government sought to reduce reliance on coal and shift to alternative energy sources, including natural gas and nuclear energy. What happened? First of all, tens of thousands of coal miners lost their jobs with minimal efforts to retrain or reskill them. And we have been talking about retraining and reskilling. Then it led to long-term unemployment in coal-dependent communities. Entire communities in coal mining regions like South Wales, Yorkshire, and Midlands were economically devastated, and with many towns still struggling decades later due to the lack of adequate economic diversification or investment. And these rapid closures resulted in widespread strikes, protests, civil unrest, culminating in the famous 1984-85 miners' strike. You will remember that. So I think UK's failure to implement a just transition led to severe economic hardships, as you can see, demonstrating the need for proactive planning in the shift from fossil fuels. That's what I4S is trying to champion. That's what we are all discussing here. Look at South Africa, for example. It has been moving forward to renewable energy while attempting to reduce reliance. However, the shift was not as well managed as it should have been. Coal-dependent regions like Mpumalanga have seen significant job losses without sufficient retraining programs or alternative job creation efforts, resulting in economic instability, increased poverty, and the country's transition to renewables has been inconsistent with an over-reliance on aging coal plants, leading to frequent blackouts and electricity shortages, that is load shedding, which have damaged the economy. And job losses and economic instability have contributed to increased social unrest with protests by workers in coal-dependent regions. So again, it highlights the need for a balanced transition, or just transitions, that includes comprehensive retraining, job creation, and reliable energy alternatives. Let's look at Australia. The coal mine closures in Hunter Valley, that's a classical case. And in 2010s, the rapid decline in demand for coal, coupled with global shift towards renewable energy, led to closures of several coal mines. And thousands of workers, of course, lost their job. The local economy, heavily reliant on coal mining, struggled to diversify. And although Australia is a global leader in renewable energy, a little attention was paid to providing displaced coal workers with opportunities in the renewable sector. As a result, affected communities faced economic hardship. And once again, workers' protests and growing political opposition have emerged as displaced workers demand better government support. I can give further examples. There is one from Poland, one that I have from Romania. The lessons are quite similar. Spain is an interesting one. Spain has plenty of sunshine and appropriate land and the rest of it. But in early 2000, Spain aggressively pursued renewable energy subsidies and installations, leading to rapid growth in wind and solar energy. However, the transition was not paired with a long-term plan, and the sudden boom and bust cycle of renewable energy subsidies caused significant job losses. And when subsidies were cut during the financial crisis in 2008, leading to instability in both renewable and fossil fuel sectors. Also, what happened was the rushed and unbalanced approach led to legal disputes, loss of investor confidence in Spain's energy sector, resulting in delayed investments in new renewable projects, and the lack of coordination between renewable energy rollout and phasing out of fossil fuel industries caused energy sector instability and social unrest. So there are lots of lessons that we can actually sort of talk about. So therefore, if one were to talk about, let's say, 10 tenets, and I'm not an expert, you are the expert, I'm just validating whatever you must have already discussed. I think they are obvious. The first is pace transition with clear timelines, like what we have been doing. And it will help to reduce the economic shocks. The second has to be investment in clean energy infrastructure, because that will create new jobs. That's very important. Old jobs go, but new jobs come in. And that will reduce the dependence on fossil fuels. Then the important part about just transition for workers, minimizing social disruptions. Fourth is carbon pricing and incentives. They are very important, implementing carbon pricing mechanisms like carbon taxes, cap and trade systems, so that the companies are incentivized to reduce emissions. And one can use the revenues from these policies to fund green innovation, subsidies for low-income households, energy-efficient upgrades, etc., and that will mitigate the economic impact. The fifth is encouraging innovation, and you talked about innovation, and we'll talk about it a little later. By increasing government and private sector funding for R&D in green technologies, and it can accelerate the decarbonization process, and I will have a chance to refer to some of these from my Indian experience. There is an obvious one about energy efficiency, the sixth one, and building upgrades, because one can really retrofit buildings and industry for energy efficiency, offering subsidies, low interest loans, tax incentives, and that will create jobs also in the construction energy service. The seventh is, of course, sustainable transportation systems, investing in public transport infrastructure, electric vehicles, non-motorized transport options, and that will help in improving urban air quality. I was the chairman of the National Auto Fuel Policy in 2003. I still remember. And it was quite a task, I must say, and you know all the story about, because again it was managing the transition issue. We went up to Euro 4, or equivalent to, BS4. And of course, there were groups who wanted rapid transition. They say, why can't we pole vault to Euro 4? And my challenge is that I'm an engineer, and the problem with engineers is that they always look at their feet are on the ground and they see what. So I remember going to Tata Motors, spent a day there. What will it take to create Euro 4 engines? And they gave me some timelines. I went to oil petroleum companies, refining companies, and asked them, because 500 parts per million sulfur, you have to bring it down to 50. So that is dehydrosulfurization, and that requires technology, that requires plants, and they have to be erected. You can't import low sulfur diesel because we didn't have foreign exchange. How much time does it take from approval to construction to commissioning and to debottlenecking? One did a calculation, and that one had to figure it in. All right, otherwise there would have been economic damage. That was actually managing the transition. And I remember I was heavily, if I may use the word, assaulted on the front page of Times of India. And they would not say Mashelkar committee, they would say Mashelkar. And on the seventh day, for 6 continuous days this happened, and on the seventh day I was on the inside, the most harassed man of the week, along with my photograph. What happened, however, was what was considered as rather relaxed, let us say, phasing out and moving from Euro 2 to Euro 3 to Euro 4 standards, turned out to be one which the government could not implement. And it took much longer than what we had predicted. But then nobody wrote about it. So I have seen that happen sort of myself, my personal sort of experience, I would say. So that's why the issue has to be managed clearly. The 8 is, of course, circular economy, waste reduction, recycling, and reuse. And we have to do this by incentivizing businesses to minimize waste, adopt more resource-efficient practices through regulations and market-based mechanisms. And of course, that will help also create new jobs in recycling, repair, material recovery sectors. The 9th is ensuring energy access and affordability. Fossil fuel subsidies are phased out. We have to ensure that clean energy subsidies and energy access programs are scaled up to support low-income communities and remote areas, providing affordable financing options, and that will ensure equitable access to clean energy, preventing energy poverty, especially for vulnerable communities. That's what we have to always worry about, while fostering inclusive economic growth. And the last, the 10, is public-private partnerships to attract large-scale private investment in sustainable infrastructure projects such as renewable energy plants, smart grids, energy storage facilities. Government policy should focus on de-risking investments for encouraging private sector participation. And this will help in leveraging private capital to finance large-scale green projects, reducing burden on public finances. And by engaging the private sector, it accelerates the deployment of climate-friendly infrastructure. So what have I done so far? First, I started by giving you an example of what happens when you do these experiments on viscoelastic fluids, rapid stretching versus giving it time. The second was, we went through what disasters can occur if it is snapping. And the next was some 10 tenets, let us say, approximate ideas about what can be done at a generic level. Then, of course, like we were deep diving, we have to deep dive and see what are the realities. That reality check is very important, what you say, because in the morning, I was in a function where I got my 49th, not 50th, 49th honorary doctorate. And the UGC chairman had come and he was giving all sorts of figures about the numbers, people getting educated. And those numbers are huge because we are 1.4 billion. That's fine. But so what? And that was the question you were asking, as a matter of fact. We need to worry about that. Do we have the required skills? And what will it take to develop those skills? I think the challenge I have seen is not that of job shortage. The challenge is skill shortage. Skill deficit, not job deficit, it is skill deficit. Because working very closely with industry, I find there are jobs, but there are no skills, basically. So it's a major transition, to be honest, it's a major transition. Now, there are very good examples, by the way, from around the world, like Denmark pioneering worker retraining programs in wind energy, helping transition of oil and gas workers to offshore wind jobs through vocational training and certification programs. Then Germany's Coal Commission initiative that provided funding for regional infrastructure and innovation projects in former coal mining areas. Then Scotland initiative like National Transition Training Fund that have helped former oil and gas workers to transition. We don't have to copy any one of them because India is different. India is special in many, many different ways. And as I always say, more than science, the behavioral science matters. When it comes to behavioral science, India is very different from the rest of the world. And if you don't factor it in, you are in difficulty. On the side, I'm supposed to also entertain you a bit, so I'll tell you something interesting about the behavioral science part of it. When our Honorable Prime Minister announced the Swachh Bharat, and there was a committee under my chairmanship that was created because drinking water and sanitation, looking at how do we get the best technologies from around the world. So I was the chairman of that standing committee for 5 years. And I found that in that committee, they had only given me technologies. So I said, it's not about building toilets, it's about using toilets, all right? So we got some social scientists also in the committee. And I remember I myself visited some villages and so on and so forth. And I remember I was talking to a Magsaysay Award winner, and she told me something interesting. She said, there is a village where there is water, there are toilets, but women will not use them. So she got a social scientist to see what was the challenge. And what that social scientist found out was that in that village, the women would make different groups, and before the sun rose, in the dark they will go, and that was the time for them to talk to each other. A drunken husband, an awful mother-in-law, or a child which is troubling and so on. And that opportunity was lost. Okay, so what did she do? Innovation. She created semicircular toilets which were open above this. So what happened? All of them could see each other. All of them could talk to each other. And the rest is history. And the use which was 0% became 100%. Will there be any American or European textbooks where such things will be there? So we Indians are special. Please understand that. And therefore we have to have, although this is global just transition, this is a local just transition based on our own behavioral science. I think we have to sort of understand that. So I think there are, I can go through a number of such examples where we have. Now, national and state governments are developing comprehensive frameworks to support this transition, focusing on energy efficiency, renewable energy deployment, and the reduction of carbon emissions across sectors. Simultaneously, rapid advancements in science and technology are paving the way for adoption of cleaner fuels and innovative technology, and some of which we will discuss in our conversation, making the pathway to a low-carbon economy more achievable. I always said that education and innovation are the currencies of the future. You're right when you said that. So investing in education and fostering innovation can accelerate research and development of new technologies. And education will also equip the workforce with the skills needed. But when I say education, please understand, there is right to education, right education, and right way of education. There are three different things, by the way. Am I right? Basically. And all of these are undergoing a change now. Right to education, of course, has come. But the right education, in terms of the massive change that is taking place because of technology, AI, for instance, and so on and so forth. I remember talking to somebody who is an expert, and he said that 60 to 70% of the children in the senior classes will end up in jobs which do not exist today. So you teach for jobs, isn't it? So what will you teach them? So there are certain permanent skills like dealing with complexity, emotional intelligence, creativity, critical thinking, and a whole range of other things that become sort of important. We have not paid much attention on that. We don't test students on this at all. Yet these are the kind of skills and not the deep domain knowledge that is going to be sort of important. ChatGPT knows everything. As simple as that. I have seen children use it. So that is a very important point. India, I personally believe, is uniquely positioned to seize this opportunity. We have a profound legacy of scientific and technological innovation. We have demonstrated our ability to push the boundaries, and we therefore must invest to excel in our innovations. At these crucial moments, I'm very proud that our very own iForest is playing a pivotal role in shaping the just transition narrative through cutting-edge research and strategic policy engagement. By marrying socio-economic research with scientific and technological solutions, iForest work demonstrates that addressing the climate crisis requires a comprehensive approach that balances environmental goals with social equity. Our initiatives highlight the need to ensure that communities impacted by the energy transition are supported through targeted policies, and some of these I sort of narrated just now. Capacity building, again, that was something that was discussed, and new economic opportunities to support communities impacted by the energy transition. A central issue for developing successful just transition measures is the engagement of states and districts where the transition will unfold and planning and implementation will happen. And therefore, worldwide, the momentum of sub-national action is growing, requiring the development of plans, setting up of dedicated administrative mechanisms, and ensuring assured financing. Our iForest is working closely with state governments, as you all know, in India, such as Maharashtra and Odisha, to develop state-specific just transition strategies, policies, and plans. And these partnerships focus on understanding the unique challenges and opportunities of each region, ensuring that the energy transition is well-planned, inclusive, and aligned with the state's economic and social development priorities. The collaborative approach, creating alternative economic opportunities, repurposing energy assets, and supporting skill development for the future, among others. The shared challenges faced by developing countries. iForest is also actually partnering with governments and organizations to promote South-South cooperation, and through platforms like the Global Just Transition Dialogue, iForest fosters collaboration across the Global South to exchange knowledge, and one of that is our manifestation in terms of the meeting that we have today, to exchange knowledge, share experiences, learn from each other, not only from successes, but also the mistakes that we have done, and develop and address regional and national contexts while advancing global climate goals. Chandra, my special words of gratitude, of thanks and congratulations to you for the leadership that you have provided and your fantastic team. I've been very, very honored, very, very privileged to be associated with you and to be learning from you, not just now, but for a long, long, long time. So I want to acknowledge you here for creating this platform to bring this diversity of voices. The transition at the end is a collective journey. We must engage with international partners. We must share knowledge. We must collaborate on innovative solutions that transcend borders. Borderless minds, borderless thinking, borderless action is what we require. And at this particular crucial juncture, I think it is platforms like this that will provide a great opportunity for exchanging ideas and experiences and creating a better world. Thank you very much.